Well, hello, welcome to Open Life Church Online. My name's Jaden. I'm one of the pastors here at Open Life, and I'm so excited that you are joining us today for our online message. Would you do me a huge favor as we begin? Would you take a moment right now to fill out a Connect card? Let us know that you are watching and engaging with our service today. We'd love to connect with you, especially if it's your first time ever, checking us out. We'd love to just tell you a little bit more about Open Life this week. And one of the ways that you can fill that out is by downloading the Open Life Church app. It's a great resource and tool for you to have on your phone. You can fill out that Connect card. You can follow up the other messages that you may have missed from the past. There's an event calendar at the bottom that tells you what's happening at Open Life in the coming weeks as well. There is some fill-in notes. If you want to follow along with today's message, you can do that right there from the Open Life Church app. So I want to make sure you have that downloaded on your phone. And so we are jumping in. We're continuing in our series through prayer and fasting. And so we've been focusing on this really neglected spiritual practice or discipline. And we want to just have this emphasis on prayer because we really truly believe that as we pray more and as we get in tune with God and are in communication with Him, and really as we spend time with Him, that God's going to continue to form us and shape us as followers of Him. And we really want to just encourage you about the different aspects of prayer. So for the last few weeks, we have looked at what it means to surrender our lives to God. And then last week, we looked at what it means to become more like Jesus as we spend time in prayer and fasting. And so today we're going to look at what it means to stand with the poor as we take time to fast and pray. And so maybe you have fasted during the start of this series. Maybe you've fasted for a meal. Maybe you've done from sun up to sundown on a few different occasions. Maybe you did a whole day. Maybe you did multiple days. And whatever you feel led to by God is what we want to encourage you to do as we take time to fast and pray. But this comes from the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus instructs what it means to live in the kingdom as one of His followers. And this is what He says, is when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And so Jesus assumes that His followers will fast. After, his death and resurrection, he knows that they will have this practice as a part of their spiritual rhythm. Jesus wants His followers to receive the blessings that this spiritual practice invites His followers into. And so far, our focus has been on the personal or spiritual benefits of fasting. We talked about surrendering our life to Him, becoming more like Jesus. If you had the chance to talk with others about your experience of fasting, maybe you were at the break fast dinner last Friday night over a week ago, or maybe you've had time in your group or in relationship with others to talk about your experience of fasting. I hope you've been encouraged by the stories that you heard around the group, around the room, about other people's experiences, because this is not just a personal thing. It is a personal thing, but when we share it in community, when we also are fasting together, we begin to be encouraged by those that are around us also participating in it. And really, we're going to look more broadly about how this practice of prayer and fasting can have impact and blessings for the greater community as a whole. And so I hope you've been encouraged by your times of fasting. I hope you've been encouraged by a story or two of others sharing about their times of prayer and fasting. But as can happen anytime when we're in prayer, maybe there's a sense or feeling that the practice just hasn't landed how you thought it would. And in the book of Isaiah, God speaks through His prophet to His people to address a time that they were going through where they too felt like their fasts weren't working. And so this is what it says. Isaiah 58:3 says, why have we fasted? That's what the people are saying. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it. And so they're asking God, why have we fasted, but you have not seen it? And so again, this is God speaking through Isaiah to the people. And so this is what Isaiah is saying. He said, he's like explaining it to them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? And as we'll read on in a minute, God is addressing the rebellion of the people through this message in Isaiah. And so I'm not saying when we have those feelings of, man, just this isn't working the way I thought it would, or I'm not seeing maybe the benefits I thought I would get as I'm praying and fasting. I'm not saying that there's rebellion in your heart and you're doing that. But what I am saying is that for both the rebellious and the faithful, sometimes we actually need to look at the focus of fasting, of just not being about ourselves, but we have to think about how our fasting affects other people. And so that's going to be what we're unpacking today. And our big idea is this: fasting is a way to love God and love our neighbor at the same time. And so it's easy to think about the vertical emphasis of prayer and fasting. It's about our relationship with God. It's surrendering to Him. It's about becoming more like Jesus. We've talked on that already, but we must not forget that there's horizontal aspects in how we relate to one another and those in our community as well when we are in prayer and fasting. And so this is what God is getting at when He's speaking through Isaiah. After He brings up about the people and what they're saying about how it's not working, their fast isn't working, it goes on in the rest of verse 3 of Isaiah 58, and it says, "Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high." And so there's obviously some misalignment with the actions of the people. They fast to please God, but in their fast, they are still choosing to act out with injustice towards others. They are not letting that vertical relationship with God and trying to seek after Him and to please Him affect the horizontal way that they're living in their actions. And then they're actually acting out injustice with the way they live with others. Goes on in Isaiah 58:5, is this the kind of fast I have chosen? This is what God is saying. Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? And so we can approach fasting with as much religious fervor as we can muster, but if we do not let the actions of fasting meet a heart that desires to be molded and shaped by God, when we surrender to Him with this practice, we can't expect to think that God is going to see our fast as acceptable. A heart surrendered to God, offering our prayers and our times of fasting with God, needs to be aligned with actions that fit into the kingdom of God. And that's what Jesus is going back to when He's encouraging His disciples that they are going to fast. And so we read on in Isaiah 58, 6-7, "Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen?" And He lists off some things. "To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter. When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood." And so the type of fasting that God has chosen, that God has accepted, is 1, to fight injustice. 2, to free people from oppression. 3, to share your food with the hungry. 4, to provide shelter to refugees, immigrants, and those with no home. 5, to clothe the naked. 6, to meet the practical needs of people all around you. The fasting that God chooses is fasting where there is now alignment between the vertical relationship between you and God, but as well with the relationship horizontally that you have with others. So that it's in harmony, that these two things, the way that we love God and it comes out in the way that we love others. Fasting is a way to love God and love our neighbor at the same time. Listen to what Scott McKnight says as he describes or really defines fasting in this way. Fasting is body poverty in response to injustice in our world. Self-impoverishment as a response to the impoverishment of others. With Isaiah 58 and our big idea in mind, we have 3 thoughts to unpack today as we look at this type of fasting. So thought 1, fasting allows us to relate with the hungry. Fasting allows us to relate with the hungry. And so here's what I want you to think about. Can you really relate with the poor or hungry, maybe when you see them on the side of the road, or when you're driving through a parking lot, or you see stories on the news of poverty in our world, or when you just experience that? Can you really relate with people in that situation when you get to go home and maybe have dinner and fill your stomach even to excess? Like, can you really, when you're even praying for those in that situation, how much can you relate to them when you get to go home and fill your stomach full of food? Fasting is a way for you to intentionally stand in solidarity with those who are literally hungry. Your prayers for the hungry change when for a time you too are hungry. And so that's what happens when we choose to fast for a minute. Last week we mentioned, and if you fasted, I imagine that you felt the short-term effects of fasting. You got hungry. You maybe got a little frustrated in the afternoon. Maybe you were just beginning to feel things that you're not accustomed to. What if those short-term effects of hunger would move us to consider the long-term effects of hunger and poverty in our community and world? And so while many of us might see hunger as a temporary inconvenience when we're fasting, there are many who are trapped in repeating cycles of poverty in our community, in our country, in our world. And so some statistics on that. Just under $31,000 for a family of 4 is what's considered the poverty line in our country. And in 2023, 43 million people in our country live with those circumstances, and 10 million of those people are children. 13.5% or 18 million of U.S. households were food insecure at some time during 2023. 13.5% of families in our country are food insecure. These households were, so this is what it means to be food insecure. These households were uncertain of having or unable to acquire enough food to meet the needs of all their members because they had insufficient money or resources for food. So I want you to think about your own situation. Ask yourself, what percentage of your income goes to pay food costs, whether it's eating out or going to the grocery store, whatever you eat within a month, how much of your money, how much of your income is going towards that? The reality is, for low-income families, 27 cents of every dollar they make goes towards food costs. While for higher income families, that figure drops down to only 7 cents. Only 7% of what a high income family makes will go towards food costs, where if you're low income, you're giving 27% of every paycheck to go towards your food costs. So now if you do the math for your own finances, maybe that you fall somewhere in between on that spectrum. But consider the decisions that have to be made when you're choosing rent versus food, or you're choosing medical costs versus food because of a sickness, an illness, an injury. Maybe you're thinking about families where it's a single parent household, a mother or father, and they have to consider, how do I pay for childcare so that I can work in order to make money to pay for food and childcare so that this, cycle continues to go on forever. And so imagine you're at the end of your pay cycle. There's maybe 3 days to go, 9 meals, and you don't have any money in your bank account to pay for food. So while many of us fast and feel a crash in the afternoon that makes it hard to complete our homework for school, or you're just trying to get the end of the workday and get home, and you're dragging, there are others who are wondering where their next meal is coming from. There are students who can't focus in the afternoon because they're hungry, and they're not going to get to eat until their next morning when they get to eat breakfast or lunch at school. And so when we think is a temporary lack of focus, we realize that there's people that are living in this situation on a daily basis. When we fast, we feel it for a moment, while others are feeling it every single day. We can come at this issue of poverty and food insecurity from so many different angles. We can come with judgment. We can come with opinions. We can sometimes come with a savior complex, like we're going to fix it. Or we can come to it from a place of humbleness that is afforded to us when we choose to take time to fast and pray, even to pray for poverty in these moments. In the 6th century, Cæsarius of Arles in France said, "Let us fast in such a way that we lavish our lunches upon the poor, so that we may not store up in our purses what we intended to eat, but rather in the stomachs of the poor." And so this is how fasting not only allows us to relate with the poor, but also, thought two, fasting encourages us to share what we have. Fasting encourages us to share what we have. And so I hope during your times of fasting, you had heightened senses of God and prayer. That's like why we do it when we first off. But maybe you were praying for something specific, or maybe you're waiting on God to speak to you or encourage you about a situation that you're walking through in your life. But did you notice any other effects in your life during the time that you were fasting? Did you notice anything about your weekly rhythms or your schedule that changed because of this practice of prayer and fasting? And so, as me and Danny were fasting our home 2 weeks ago, we just saw the super small, tangible impact is that we had less dishes to do. It was actually very nice. We had eaten less meals during that whole weekend. We realized, wow, we're not doing as much cleaning as we usually did. And so think about those physical, just small little impacts that had in your life. And one of those impacts, though, is also happens in our finances. Dishes might be easier to notice, while finances might take a little bit longer as you get into the rhythm of fasting. But if you look close, you realize that as fasting becomes a regular rhythm, the difference in the amount of money you spend on food might be small in one moment, but over time actually becomes pretty dramatic. And so let's just use an example. Let's say that you commute to work every day, every morning, 5 days a week. This is what the example will be. And on your way to work, maybe one or multiple days, you stop at Starbucks and you grab a coffee and you grab a pastry. And so I just did some things on the app to see what does this run you usually. And so for what I chose, it was going to be about $12 if you add a small tip in there, and $12 for a drink and a pastry on your way to work. And so let's just say that that's your normal daily or a weekly rhythm that you do. And let's just say that instead of doing that and spending that $12, you say, man, today I'm going to forego breakfast and I'm going to take time to pray and to fast before I head into work. And that might be hard for you. That might be something you do where, you're going to feel it in a few hours. Those effects, those short-term effects of hunger are going to hit you, but you're doing it. You're like, I'm doing it to pray. I'm doing it to focus on God. But what you don't realize is that if you did that every week, that $12 a week becomes $624 over the course of a whole year. And that's nothing to sneeze at. And really, that where is that money going? It's gonna go to it's gonna stay in your bank account. It's gonna stay in your app. It's gonna stay in your wallet or your purse. And so the question is, what if that tangible amount of money went from your wallet or your purse or your Starbucks app and actually went to the stomachs of the poor. 1 John 3:16-18 says, this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. So this is where we see the harmony between the vertical and the horizontal. Like John here is saying, like, we can't just love God with our words and say to a world that, yeah, we love God, but actually that love needs to come out with the way we live, the way we act, the way we engage with other people. We ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters, but that's pretty aspirational. And I just love that it simply says, but if you see someone in need, material possessions work as well. That's a way to show tangible love to other people. And so the question is, can we lay down our stomach for a meal for someone in need? What if after a regular time of fasting, so over the course of a few weeks, a month, or over the year, what if you realize that $624 we found from fasting from breakfast one day a week made its way to a family that we know can't pay for their food bills on a certain week or a certain month? What if that money were to make its way to our local food bank, Good Roots Northwest? Or what if it made it to Convoy of Hope as you see the initiatives that they're doing to fight hunger? Or what if in the fall that $624 made its way to the Community Big Give to pay for Thanksgiving meals to families who need it in our community? In the New American Commentary on Isaiah, this is what the author writes about the section of Isaiah we read earlier. It says, God's fast does not remove or disparage appropriate ritual expressions of worship, but it integrates the attitudes of fasting with the behavior of a person before and after they fast. When one fasts and prays for divine intervention from an oppressive force, a drought, an enemy, a wicked neighbor, or things going on in our world right now, a fire, a hurricane, a war in Ukraine, a war in Israel and Gaza, the ideal answer is for God to remove all oppression and give people freedom from injustice. If the people praying, and so this is us, if the people praying want or expect God to respond and bring them freedom from oppression, the people, us, the people praying, should do everything in their power to assist the hand of God in bringing freedom from oppression to everyone in that community. And so this example of giving up a breakfast once a week at Starbucks so that you can fast and pray, and then over time taking that money that you would have paid for that one breakfast and giving it to those in need is one way for us to do something to assist the hand of God in bringing freedom from oppression to everyone in our community. When the practice of fasting extends past just our time of not eating and moves us towards sharing what we have, we begin to realize that in thought 3, fasting invites us into God's work of justice in our world. Fasting invites us into God's work of justice in our world. And so do you ever feel powerless when you see the things going on in our world? Did you see the stories about the fires in California and just feel like, I can't do anything for that? Or whether it was the hurricanes, or you see the stories of the fighting in Ukraine or in Israel and Gaza, or whether we're talking about things in our country, immigration, the list can go on and on. Poverty, hunger, is like these issues can feel so large and we can feel powerless in the moment to do anything. But what fasting does is it invites us to reflect on our own lives and see where injustice might be taking place in our world, but actually allowing us to work towards justice. When we fast in this way, we're no longer allowing the dichotomy of the spiritual and the physical. Rather, we are allowing our surrender to God and petitioning Him through prayer and through through prayer and fasting to have a practical, loving, and tangible effect in our world. The vertical begins to affect the horizontal. And this happens because we actually set aside an hour and we actually set aside some food that actually has a financial impact on our bottom line. This is what Scott McKnight says again. He says, food joins humans to other humans because we share meals together. Whenever we give up food intentionally, we refrain from relationships. When a group protests by fasting, they both negate one relationship with the haves and they affirm another relationship with the have-nots. And since the structures of power always have sufficient food, fasting is not only refusing relationship, but is also protesting the power structures that exist. This is like what we realize is that when we take time to fast and to pray, is we're forgoing something and we're putting ourselves in a way that relates to the poor, where we actually begin to see that, wow, I have something to give to the poor, and there's something that I can begin to do. We move from maybe associating only with the haves, and we begin to move towards relationship with the have-nots, to bring justice to those that have been brought injustice in their lives. And so fasting is one small way for us to announce to ourselves, to our church, to our world and community that we're seeing things in our world that are not right, that we are seeing injustice in our world, but God is working to bring justice, and God will bring ultimate justice when Jesus returns. And it's something that we long and pray for, and it's why we fast, is because we see it going on. Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen, God says, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter, when you see the naked to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? This is the prayer and fasting that God chooses. And so oftentimes people will say this, when there's opportunities for prayer and there's opportunities to be generous or to give. I don't have enough time in my day to pray, or I don't have enough money to give in this moment. And so if we just want to strip it down to the very basic idea of fasting, is when you take time to fast and pray, you suddenly have time to pray, and you suddenly have finances to give. You would have spent that money to pay for whatever meal. And it might not be a lot. Maybe you're a super, budgeter and you get all your groceries the week before. But by you delaying the time when you are going to eat that meal, you are putting money in your pocket that you don't have to spend in the future. And so it might be a small amount. It might not be $12. Maybe it's $1.50 or $3. You have it so, parsed out to where you know how much you're paying for every meal. But really, that's what we are offered in times of prayer and fasting, is time and resources that we then get to offer to God and say, where is injustice in my world? And where do I get to reallocate my time, my resources to bring justice? And that is and so we think of it only as a moment, and we think of it, I fasted 2 weeks ago, but this is where fasting needs to become a regular rhythm, where we get to see this time compound, where we get to see these finances build up to actually have a very real impact in our community. And this is what St. Augustine says: how many poor can be filled by the breakfast we have this day given up? And so our action point today, as a conclusion, is to continue to find a time to fast. Continue to find a time to fast. And so for you, that might be a meal. That might be sun up to sundown for one of the days this week. It might, and it can be something that you begin to think more holistically. What are you going to do in a month's time for fasting? And then thinking yearly, like if we're going to start the year off with a heavier time of fasting, then that's going to change maybe how throughout the rest of the year you do something weekly or once a month that helps create a sustainable rhythm of prayer and fasting that we get to offer to God. But so the other part of that is, so continue to find a time to fast and then give what you gave up. How many poor can be filled by the breakfast we have this day given up, is what St. Augustine said. Then how could we give what you gave up? And so this is going to need to be an experiment for you. This is going to need to be something that you look at over time. And it's going to be something that is going to look different from person to person, from family to family. But I would just encourage you, maybe you do that Starbucks example and it fits perfectly with your weekly rhythm, where you say, yeah, I go to Starbucks almost every day, or I go to a coffee shop every day. And I could fast and I could really tangibly understand about a time that I now have to pray or to serve at a local food bank, and I now have finances to now give to a food bank, or to give to Convoy of Hope, or to give to the Community Big Give. And you begin to see that over a couple of weeks, over a month, over a year, and how that impacts your life. And so there's things you could do. Maybe you do something where you fast sun up to sundown and you say breakfast, lunch, and then I'm giving that money to Good Roots Northwest. Or I'm going to forego breakfast, lunch, I'm going to give to Convoy of Hope. Whatever it is for you, you can find that. And so for families, this might look a little different. We do need to be careful when we're introducing fasting with children. And so maybe you do something else where you choose to not fast, but you choose to eat as the poor would eat, for a meal a month or a meal a week, where you look up and you see what do people in poverty eat on a regular basis. And when you do that, what you'll find is it's usually rice and beans. And so to think like for a meal this week, maybe you have rice and beans only, and you use it as a learning opportunity for your children to begin to recognize the poverty in our community and to say, you know what, there's people living in this way in our world, and so what impact does that have on us? This is how much we usually pay for food, and this is how much goes towards rice and beans. And if you did that over a course of a month or a week or a year, you would have a tangible impact of the money difference. And you would say, so with that, we are going to now give to a local food bank, or we are going to give to a need or initiative that is going to feed people in poverty. And so now you've taken that action of choosing to eat like people in poverty do, and you're beginning to help people in poverty. And it's just one way to begin to let that vertical and horizontal harmony begin to happen in our lives. And so what would this look like when given over time during a regular rhythm of prayer and fasting? And the truth is, we don't know. If every person or family gave $624 to the food bank this year, it would have a huge impact. There would be something that happened because of those gifts, because you chose to pray and fast once a week. And so this is how Isaiah 58 concludes as the kind of the reward of a true prayer and fast that God has chosen. It says when we do this, when we look out for those 6 things that we listed off, then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You'll be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets and dwellings. That should be our prayer and our heart's cry when we come to God in prayer and fasting. Yes, we surrender to God. Yes, we are becoming more like him, as Thad talked about yesterday, but we are also standing with the poor. We're working towards justice for those who have been plagued by injustice. And we can't imagine or fathom the impact of that, but it takes all of us as a community to do that and to help announce to the world that our church community, our place of being together, is a place of justice and a place where we work towards that by the way that we actually live. Like we're choosing to actually make practices like this a part of our lives. And so that's my encouragement to you today, is that when you're fasting and praying, you're also standing with the poor. And so let's pray. God, I just thank you so much for the opportunity to come and share this today. I pray that we have been challenged by your word about a fast that you choose as acceptable, God. And it is one where we see that you are fighting injustice, where you're freeing people from oppression, where people share our food and possessions with the hungry, where we provide shelter for refugees, immigrants, and those with no home, where we're able to clothe the naked, where we're able to meet practical needs for people around us, God. And I just pray that over every single person at Open Life, that we would see the injustice of our world and find about ways that we could be praying and fasting and then partaking in the work of justice to meet those needs. God, you know how you are calling people and moving people, but I pray, Lord, that there would be so many great stories as we begin to choose to make prayer and fasting a more regular part of our rhythm, whether that's a monthly or weekly, and a part of our yearly rhythm, God. And so please help us to be able to do that. Let us walk as you're calling us, and let us love well. Laying down our lives for our brothers and sisters is great, but meeting practical needs with our possessions is also a good way to love our neighbors. And so we ask for this in your mighty and powerful name today. Amen. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great week. Well, I hope you were encouraged and challenged by today's message. Thank you so much for engaging with us until the end of our service. This is our last call for you to fill out a Connect card. Let us know that you are watching and engaging with our service today. We'd love to pray with you, so be sure to fill it out. Let us know how we can be praying this week. It's also the time where we talk about your giving and generosity to Open Life. Every time you give to Open Life, we set aside the first 10% to go towards what we call strategic generosity, helping people where they're hurting in their lives for issues that are related to education, hunger, relief work, bringing justice to the oppressed, helping people to find Jesus if they're in parts of our world that have never heard the good news, and so many other things. And so we thank you for your generosity as we get to be strategically generous with those finances. And so for the month of January, we are actually focusing on missions trips and the opportunity that we have at Open Life to go engage with a few different cultures in our world this year. And so just in January, we are sending out a team to go to Bangladesh for a justice trip with Speak Up for the Poor, one of our strategic partners, helping to educate girls and prevent child marriages in the country of Bangladesh. We're so excited to send them off this month and to then hear next month about their experience and the things that they've learned and the things they got to participate in. So please be praying for them before they go, as they are there, and then once they get back, that we would just really be encouraged by the work that they're doing. But as well, we are sending a team at the end of July to go to the Dominican Republic to partner with our missionaries that we support, Jamie and Barely Bayo. And we're so excited to send a team to go and do a number of different outreach ministries and engaging with the ministry that Jamie and Barely are leading there in Santo Domingo. So we're really excited to take time in the coming months to prepare a team and to ask God for finances and resources to be able to send our team. And we're so excited to see God at work amongst the people in our church, but as well as they connect and engage with the culture of the Dominican Republic. And so we are so excited to do the same thing, prepare to participate, and then celebrate afterwards of what God is doing there and in the lives of our people and their people. And so we are so excited for what is in store for 2025 And so thank you for your generosity to Open Life. So when you give this month, the first 10% is going to be going towards the team funds for each of those trips. And so we're excited to be able to participate in that. And so thank you for your participation through your generosity. Well, this is the end of our service today. I hope that you just had a great time engaging with us, and I hope you'll consider joining us next Sunday, either wherever you're watching online. Do that again so you can stay up to date with what Open Life is doing and be encouraged by our messages. But as well, we'd love to invite you to come to the Bonney Lake High School Performing Arts Center. Each Sunday we meet there at 10 a.m. and we hope to see you there soon. So have a great week, and we will see you very soon.